those are all of the bye teams going into the weekend. Let's get into it, guys. As again, we have 52 to discuss, and we always start with Conference USA, which is a bit weird because this week there are no weeknight games for the conference, as all of them are occurring on Saturday, which is it's been a hot minute since we have had every single game occur on that weekend day. But we will start with the morning kickoff one, and that is Missouri State heading over to Lynchburg, Virginia to take on Liberty. The Flames are 8-point favorites. Kind of makes sense. They kind of come alive here for the Flames a little bit later in the season as Conference USA's games have been getting going. And last week was a nice win against Delaware. That's kind of why we're going with Liberty in the first place. They are on a decent streak. And then on top of that, there's no way Missouri State shows up to the FBS level into the conference their first season and beats Liberty. So yeah, it's back-to-back weekends where the new boys joining the level of Division I football. Yeah, they're going to get done by the Flames for sure. As we are going to be talking about Delaware next, who played Liberty last week. Disappointing loss there. They will be playing Louisiana Tech, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be 2 weeks in a row where the Blue Hens fall. As we're taking the Bulldogs, who are 6-point favorites. It has been rising since the beginning of the week at 5.5. And again, we only use those numbers to kind of give us a decent indicator of who might win, as people in the real world are putting money on it. So if they're doing that, there's a reason why they're going in that direction. And again, it's just an indicator. And it's going off beep beep, and Louisiana Tech is a favorite. They've been playing really solid in the conference so far this season. Competitive games out of conference, especially that game in Baton Rouge against LSU. And that's why we're going with Louisiana Tech. FIU, they're heading over to play Middle Tennessee State. Yeah, we have to take FIU. The Raiders are, I think, I don't want to say the clear bottom because I don't know when they'll play Sam Houston State yet, or if they do this season. Regardless, they're pretty much the bottom of the conference. They have not won a game in a while. Then on top of that, they're just tending to lose as of late. Last week, a game against Jacksonville State, very close. They're at home, but still lose to the Gamecocks, and I think it'll be something of the same kind of case here when the Golden Panthers come to town. So yeah, we're taking Florida International. They're only favored by 1 point, so it's one of those really slim margins being set up. But it looks like if we're picking FIU, they most likely cover as well. As Middle Tennessee State, you got to remember, guys, they lost to Austin Peay at home earlier this season. We move over to Jacksonville State on the road, all the way there in West Texas, and to be more specific, it is in El Paso, Texas. UTEP is who they're playing this weekend, and yeah, there's no way, no how we are not taking the Gamecocks, even traveling this far across the country. Jacksonville State has been finding ways to win. They found a way last week against a lesser opponent. It'll be the same case most likely this weekend. But it is interesting as their spread against the Miners is only also -1 in favor of Jacksonville State, the road team. I think that is only being set because, again, it's a decent amount of miles they have to go for this kickoff. But I think at the end of the day, Jacksonville State wins it there. We keep moving to the team in first place on the road in New Mexico, taking on the Aggies, as it's Kennesaw State versus New Mexico State. The Owls for this afternoon kickoff are 9.5-point favorites. And I think it's a little warranted, as again, they are in first place in the conference standings at the moment. Jacksonville State is right behind them. For New Mexico State, I can't really say anything too positive for them. I know they beat Tulsa earlier this season. They're at home. But other than that, it's kind of been hit or miss, and a decent amount of misses. I'm forgetting who beat them earlier this year. I think it might have been Louisiana Tech who came down there to Santa Fe and beat the Aggies. So I'm guessing also Kennesaw State gets the job done, but also could be the case where that one is completely off. I wouldn't be surprised if the Owls fall for the first time in conference. You know, they're eventually going to lose one of these games. And yeah, at least they're going bowling. We're still going to go with the Owls. Again, they're 9.5-point favorites. The final game to talk about is not a conference game. It's a non-con, as Sam Houston State goes up to the Northwest to take on Oregon State. They're in Corvallis. Oregon State, only 2 wins this season so far, get their first FBS win last week against Washington State. They're in-conference rival somewhat. And then a couple weeks ago, they beat Lafayette, an FCS school. And they're taking on a winless Bearcats team so far this season. And I don't think Sam Houston State gets their first win on the road. Yeah, the Beavers, maybe this is them finishing out the season on a bit of a hot streak going into 2026, at least with their heads held up high. We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, we're going to go with the Beavers. They're also 9.5-point favorites. That is one big spread that I think maybe doesn't get covered. But Oregon State wins it at the end of the day for this nightcap kickoff game. As that is our picks for Conference USA. We keep moving to the MAC. And so far, so well for us. The Tuesday games that we discussed on Monday, we talked about our picks. We went with Akron over UMass. Well, that came true. 44-10 is what the Zips did to the Minutemen. Yeah, UMass, one of the worst teams at the FBS level. Akron, also not that far away. They were 10-point favorites. They more than covered there. But also on top of that, UMass is just garbage. Absolute garbage. But like, when you look at like your garbage bin and you put like the heavier things at the bottom, or at least like they make their way down there, that's kind of like UMass. Like Akron's kind of like the lighter weight trash, if that makes any sense. But at the end of the day, we got that right. The other one we got right. We were risking it for the biscuit a little bit, okay? Because Miami of Ohio has not lost a conference game, though the Bobcats of Ohio hosting the Redhawks were favored by 3 points. They do cover 24-20 there at home. This was a must-win situation for Ohio if they wanted to get to the conference championship game there in Detroit. They achieved that, and then also now they need to finish the job by running the table and then obviously getting into that championship game, which I think they do deserve. They've had some impressive non-conference performances. You know, coming up, I don't want to say short in Columbus against Ohio State, but obviously putting up a decent fight there, beating West Virginia earlier this season. So there's a lot going for Ohio in general, and beating Miami of Ohio, obviously an in-state foe as well, is a good thing. And yeah, I'm very happy that so far this week we are 2-0. Moving to some Wednesday games, we got Kent State heading over to Ball State. These ones are kicking off literally probably around right now, or maybe just like 30 minutes earlier. Regardless, we are going with Ball State over Kent State, even if the kickoff happened before we went live. We were always going to go Ball State over the Flashes. You can never not pick a MAC team against Akron or Kent State or UMass. So yeah, that's why we're going with Ball State. They're only favored by 3 points. It has been rising since the beginning of the week at 1.5. Kind of made not that much sense there, to be quite honest with you. But Kent State, I'd say, has decently improved. They're kind of winning games here in 2025 versus the previous 2 seasons that we have been talking about them. The other Wednesday game is between Northern Illinois and Toledo. We're going with Toledo. I don't really like the pick because Toledo has definitely let us down in past weeks. I'm talking about that Bowling Green game. But yeah, I think they should be better than the Huskies here. On top of that, the Rockets are favored by 15 points. That is a big margin. Being in the spread there, it is rising from the beginning of the week at 14.5. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people like the Rockets there, and we were already gonna pick them anyways over Northern Illinois. So yeah, let's go Toledo. Eastern Michigan versus Bowling Green. This is the final game to talk about in the Mid-American, and also the only one occurring on Saturday. Very, very interesting matchup. This is probably going to be the closest result, I think, out of all these games, even closer than Ohio versus Miami of Ohio. The spread right now is in favor for the Eagles at -2. And Eastern Michigan has been defending their home turf quite decently this season. They beat UL Lafayette at home. They've been beating other teams at home as well. Was it a couple weeks ago when they played Western Michigan? Didn't go so well, but that's Western Michigan. Bowling Green, on the other hand, very disappointing loss. Last week I was a little miffed as we got it wrong in their blowout loss to Buffalo 28-3. But yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty close game. Maybe it's decided by a game-winning field goal, and that's why we're saying the closest margin of the weekend for the Mid-American. And we're going to go with Eastern Michigan, which is, I don't want to say it's rare, but not very common for us to pick the Eagles. As we keep moving through another conference, that conference is Sunbelt. Sunbelt Funbelt. It is a weeknight game, starting off with our picks. And the first game is Georgia Southern at Appalachian State. This is actually, I think there's a decent amount of games where it's just like I don't feel comfortable with my pick, but between the Mountaineers and Eagles, I have to go Mountaineers. Even though a couple weeks ago they let us down there in Boone with a loss to Coastal Carolina. The line being set right now at the moment is 5 points in favor for Appalachian State. The beginning of the week it started at 6.5, so it's been dropping. I can kind of get that, because again, we've already talked about our disappointment, and maybe that's what is going on there with the bettors. We're still going to go with App State. They're the home team. Georgia Southern's not been themselves this season. It's been a lot of sloppy stuff, but they have been coming through for us here and there. I know a couple weeks ago, I think we picked them for UMass, them versus not UMass, Southern Miss. They let us down, but they didn't let us down against Georgia State. So there's things that we can say that we like about Georgia Southern, but not here for this game. So yeah, let's go Mountaineers. Starting with the Saturday games, the biggest margin being set between two teams, that'll be James Madison and Marshall. The Dukes are favored by 13.5 points. They're taking on the Thundering Herd in Huntington, West Virginia, which is pretty interesting because Marshall earlier this season had their way also at home against Old Dominion, who were technically at the time in first place there in the Sunbelt East. At the moment, James Madison's in the Sunbelt East lead. It's kind of interesting. But I think at the end of the day, enter the Jays. Yeah, James Madison wins. There are just a little bit better. I don't think by 13.5 points will be the difference. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Marshall has been playing some decent football. Last week, beat Coastal Carolina. This week, oh yeah, they should be putting up a decent fight against the Dukes, but I think the Dukes win. We keep moving to another game I don't like. Southern Miss on the road to take on Arkansas State. Don't like this pick. I don't want to pick either of these teams because they have been trendy with us in not getting it right, whether it's Arkansas State or Southern Miss. We're going to go with the Golden Eagles, though. They are in the first place for the Sunbelt West, so they definitely want to continue to win to make sure they're in pole position. But same for Arkansas State. They're both one loss, I believe, in conference, or if I'm not mistaken, maybe the Golden Eagles are undefeated so far in the conference. So yeah, it's going to be a big game here to determine who will most likely play James Madison at the end of the season. And yeah, let's go Southern Miss. Second to last game to talk about, Georgia State taking on Coastal Carolina. Man, there's so many games in the Sunbelt Fun Belt where it doesn't feel fun to pick teams between the two. But yeah, we're going to go with the Chandlers. So let's go Box. They're in Myrtle Beach against the Panthers. Coastal Carolina is favored by 7.5 points, so that makes it a little bit more of a comfortable pick, but you just never know with Georgia State sometimes. So far this season, they have been, losing when we have them losing. So it's not been terrible, but there is a game or two, maybe by the end of the season, where we get it wrong. This might be that week. But again, we think Coastal Carolina wins. The final game, Texas State heads down to UL Lafayette to take on the Raging Cajun. Texas State so far this season is winless in conference, the absolute disappointment in the Sunbelt Fun Belt. And the Raging Cajun have been winning games here and there. They were definitely disappointing when they made that trip up to Eastern Michigan and lost. I don't think they're going to be disappointing us here. This is one we're going against the grain. Texas State hasn't won a conference game again, and I think that's going to continue. They have just been super disappointing, especially with their start of the season, where they look pretty decent. They tested Arizona State, but here, yeah, they lose. Again, we're going against the grain. Lafayette is not favored, as the Bobcats have a 2.5 point spread in their favor. Gonna be interesting. Very slim spread as well, and that's why we think the Raging Cajun win at home. As those are our Sunbelt picks. So now we move into the Mountain West. Only 4 games to pick. The Mountain West, as of late, has been pretty slim in the amount of games that have been on their weekend slates. We start with Air Force at San Jose State. This is a nice afternoon kickoff between the Falcons and Spartans. I want to go San Jose State for sure, but you just never know with Air Force, who have been pretty bad on defense. But when their defense shows up, but like Air Force, Falcons, pretty decent team. San Jose State has had a lot of close games, and I think that's also why they win this. They just find ways to not lose. And then on top of that, they're favorites. 4.5 points in favor of the Spartans. It has been rising since the beginning of the week at 3.5. So yeah, let's go San Jose State there. We got Nevada heading over to Logan, Utah to take on the Aggies. And Nevada, probably the worst team in the conference, going on the road, most likely loses here. Utah State is favored by 9 points. It has actually been dropping since the beginning of the week at 10. But still, Utah State should be winning this one, as they definitely want to try to be bowl eligible. But yeah, it's kind of a must win for them. For Nevada, they're basically done for the rest of the year, so it's kind of just a game that you're trying to win some pride with. And I don't think they'll be doing that whatsoever. So yeah, let's go Utah State. Next one up, pretty interesting. UNLV heads over to Colorado State. I say interesting because UNLV at the beginning of the week were favored by 6 points. It has now dropped to 4. I'm like, okay, I didn't see any crazy news coming out, but UNLV is that team this season that just has a terrible first half. And if they do have a terrible first half, sometimes they find a way to win. They didn't find a way to win last week against New Mexico. And not too long ago when they made that trip up to Boise, they also got, the cheeks clapped there. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. Colorado State did beat Fresno State there at home about like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But yeah, this one's kind of like another scared one, like the Air Force San Jose State game, where it's like I don't really like my pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams win. As we keep moving to now San Diego State heading over to Hawaii. Yes, we finally get a game there in Honolulu to end our games for this upcoming weekend. It's been a while. It's been a while, guys. And I can't wait to stay up all night to watch the Rainbow Warriors take on the Aztecs. It should be a good one, to be quite honest with you. It should be a pretty entertaining game. I should expect San Diego State's defense to cause a lot of trouble. But Hawaii with Mike Alejandro, super competitive. And yeah, should be, again, probably a one possession difference. For the Aztecs, they are favored by 7 points. So that kind of makes a little bit of sense. But also, when you think about it, Hawaii kind of needs to win this game to keep themselves in contention to play for a Mountain West title. Very hard ask, as they're going against the first place team in the standings at the moment. So yeah, to keep them in that race, it's definitely must win, but I don't think they win this. Let's go San Diego State. We keep moving. So we're getting at it, guys. We have now the American to talk about. And in the American, we start with a Thursday night kickoff between UTSA taking a trip to Tampa, Florida to take on South Florida. We're picking the Bulls. Here are your sports outposts. We have them ranked in our top 25. You know, when you go down to Gainesville and you win, it's pretty impressive because Texas couldn't do that. So yeah, that's why we have the Bulls ranked in the top 25. They take on a very tricky UTSA team that just handed Tulane their first loss in conference last week at home. They are not at home. South Florida has been playing pretty good football there when the games are in Tampa. So that's why we're also picking them. The Bulls are favored by 14 points. I think it was a very similar line that was being set between the Road Raiders and Green Wave. But I think it was around like 9 to 10 in favor of Tulane. But yeah, UTSA, it seems like they don't travel really well outside the state of Texas when it comes to playing football. Earlier this season, they made a trip to Philly to play Temple and lost there. So it's probably going to be the same case when they play USF. Tulane will head over to Memphis to take on the Tigers. This is a Friday night kickoff game. It's a Friday night game I'm going to be watching alongside some CIF football over here in California, as that is playoff weekend for all the high school games, or at least most of them. So it's going to be a pretty jam-packed football day for me. Tulane loss again. We just mentioned to UTSA last week. Yeah, making mistakes. I think they're going to make enough mistakes to allow Memphis to win. Interesting line being set. -4 in favor of the Tigers. It has been dropping since the beginning of the week at 6.5. That's pretty interesting. It's like, ooh, what is there insider information for the Green Wave? But Jake Retzlaff is going to have probably one of his best games if Tulane wants to win this. It's a must win for them if they want to compete for a conference title. It would be a bit of a bummer if they knock off Memphis here, because that would take the Tigers out of the not only conference title picture, but also out of contention for the college football playoff, as the rankings just came out yesterday, and Memphis is in that number 12 spot, as they are the highest ranking fifth conference member. And yeah, they have to win this and basically win the rest of their games and the conference title to get into the playoff, as they were technically not even in the top 25. So yeah, that's why we're gonna go Memphis. It should be a very close affair between the two, but we'll have to see at the end of the day if they get the job done. But it's gonna be a great game on Friday to tune into. Next up, we have Temple heading over to Army. They're in West Point. That's what I was like. What is the city called? Oh yeah, it's West Point. Duh. Okay, what are you doing? Owls versus Black Knights. I'm gonna go with Army. I don't like this pick whatsoever. They have actually been playing not too well at home. But it is Temple, so could be a game where they get the job done. Temple last week lost to East Carolina at home, so on the road for them, yeah, it should be a difficult test. Army, on top of that, they definitely want to make sure that they are bowl eligible, so getting a win here just helps solidify that. And so that's why we're going Army, who are also favored by 7 points. That's pretty interesting. I don't think they cover. I think this is going to be a very, very close game, like they had last week against Air Force. We keep moving to one of the most difficult games to pick this week, and that is between UAB and Rice. The Blaze take a trip to Houston, Texas to take on the Owls. 2.5 point favorites in favor for Rice. Yeah, this is another one where I'm like, there's so many actually games here in week 11 I don't want to pick. Maybe that's because of my PTSD from not doing so well last week, but especially this game, this is like the bottom teams. You can add Charlotte to that party here in the American, so it's a little tricky. So we're gonna go Rice, but boy, am I gonna be upset if Rice doesn't come through with a win over the Blaze, who got rid of their head coach earlier this season and then all of a sudden showed up against Memphis. But since then, they've been not winning, and I think they're going to continue to not win here in Houston. We got Charlotte taking on their in-state foe, East Carolina. We're going to go Pirates. This is the biggest line being set for the conference. The Pirates are favored by 28.5 points. That's pretty insane. But it is warranted, as Charlotte, probably the worst team in the conference. I think they only had one win so far this season. The 49ers have just not been getting that gold that they've been digging for. They've been getting a lot of coal and other minerals that are not helping them out win games. So yeah, we're going to go East Carolina, as they're going to be getting the booty there. Tulsa takes a trip down to, Boca Raton, Florida, to take on Florida Atlantic. Another game where it's like, it's not the bottom, but it's like the teams right above the bottom for the Golden Hurricanes and Owls. But I think we're going to go hoo-hoo with Florida Atlantic. They're favored by 3 points, which has been dropping since the beginning of the week at 3.5 in favor of FAU. This is like another pick where I'm like, I'm not very comfortable with picking Florida Atlantic. Tulsa did beat Oklahoma State earlier this season, but they have also lost to New Mexico State. So it's like, when is the Golden Hurricanes going to be consistent? I don't think it's going to start this week. So that's why we're going to go Florida Atlantic. The final game to mention is Navy versus Notre Dame. Cute little matchup that has been going on for quite a long time. And yeah, there's no way Navy wins this one. I'm sorry. Midshipman fans, I mean, I had you ranked for like the longest time. You finally lose to North Texas, which makes it a little bit nicer for us, because I really didn't want to give Notre Dame a ranked win here at Your Sports Outpost, but last season that was the case. And I remember the Midshipmen had no chance in that game against Notre Dame, and probably in this one as well, unfortunately. The Fighting Irish are favored by 26.5 points. It has risen from 25. I don't know if they cover, because last week they played Boston College and it was only 25-10. It was around the same kind of range for that line, which was set last week, and very similar to the one against Navy. But we're gonna have to wait and see, especially if Notre Dame's offense doesn't get things going. But I think at the end of the day, Notre Dame wins. So yeah, let's go Fighting Irish. is that we keep moving. We have the Atlantic Coast Conference now to talk about. No weeknight games. I think that's like a first for a decent minute for the ACC. So we start with a early kickoff between SMU and Boston College. The Ponies take a trip up to Chestnut Hill to take on the Eagles. Last week, Boston College, decent fight against Notre Dame. They obviously were never going to win that game, but you know, they showed up. Here against SMU, maybe, but I just think the Ponies, they have the momentum now to get back into pole position somewhat, to get into the ACC championship game again, back-to-back seasons. At least they won't have to play Clemson, right? Even though they just beat them not too long ago. They just beat Miami. And yeah, this is just them having to get business done so they can make a trip to Charlotte to compete for a conference title. The Ponies are favored by 10.5 points. That's also a good reason of why you pick SMU. But the week before that Miami win, they went over to play Wake Forest and lost. So the offense definitely needs to get things going. We'll have to wait and see if anything bad happens to them. But yeah, let's go SMU. Miami is hosting Syracuse. This is the biggest line being set for the Atlantic Coast Conference. 28.5 points in favor for the Hurricanes. Kind of makes a lot of sense as they return home to their cozy spot in Florida, Hard Rock Stadium, as they made a very treacherous trip and lost to SMU last week there in Dallas. Yeah, these Florida schools are very fragile when they don't play football in their home state. For this one, Syracuse, a very wounded fruit there for the Orange, as yeah, they have just been losing game after game. This past week on Monday's show, we talked about some news that Fran Brown has made some staff changes there for the wide receiver positions and quarterback position. We'll see if that makes a difference within a week. Probably not, especially when you're going up against Miami, who's going to be very physical. And I don't think Syracuse brings that physicality whatsoever. So yeah, let's go Hurricanes. We keep moving to Duke, taking a trip up to Connecticut to play UConn, the non-conference game. It's a decent amount of them this week. The Blue Devils also somehow, some way, in the picture for an ACC title appearance, to at least compete for that. Yeah, I was not expecting them to beat Clemson, especially looking at the scoreline as that game was going on. It looked like Clemson was going to be able to, you know, hold it, keep it, and get the win at home. But no, Duke beat Clemson for the first time there in South Carolina since 1980. Yeah, there's like a lot of craziness going on where we have seen teams beat other teams for the first time since, you know, the last century, which is interesting. For Duke against UConn, though, I think it's going to be a bit of a test, at least for the first three quarters, but Duke should be pulling away. Mensa has been pretty decent. I know he didn't get the job done against his former school in Tulane when they made that trip down to New Orleans. But ever since, they've been pretty consistent. Their only conference loss this season is to Georgia Tech. So yeah, adding a nice win to UConn, just helping out the resume in general, a pretty decent thing to, I guess, put on there. Even though UConn hasn't been too crazy, they've only kind of beaten like Boston College and some like an FCS school, if I'm not mistaken. There hasn't been too many crazy things for the Huskies. But yeah, let's go Blue Devils. They're favored by 8.5 points. So yeah, let's go Duke. Stanford. They will head over to Chapel Hill to take on North Carolina. The Tar Heels playing another Northern California school, but this time in their home field, which is going to be pretty interesting because, yeah, North Carolina has been, I think, as of late, all right. They tested Virginia, took them to overtime. Last week, got their first ACC win on the road against Syracuse. So there's some positivity going on. But there has been some interesting news that we're going to talk about in our news section. For Stanford, they're making a quarterback switch for this game. I'm not too sure if it's going to make much of a difference. I think the program is just kind of bad. It's just really bad. And it's kind of just night and day from what it was back in the last decade. And I continue to think that they're going to be losing games that they should. Last week we did pick Stanford over Pitt. That was a mistake, but that was because, we're using like teams traveling from, the East Coast to the West Coast. Sometimes they struggle. Here, I think when they make another trip across the country, they lose. So yeah, let's go North Carolina, who are favored by 7.5 points. We got Virginia taking on Wake Forest up next. It's a nice afternoon kickoff. We're picking the Cavaliers, and they should be winning here. If they don't, ooh, what a total mess the Atlantic Coast Conference would be. That'll at least put Louisville in pole position to not only, I guess, represent the ACC in the playoff, but at least in the next rankings, they will be the team in that 12-team bracket, which is not good. Not good whatsoever. The conference at the moment is looking very, very, very bad compared to, even the Big 12. They look closer to the American, or if not, pretty equal to the American. Even though, Miami did beat my USF earlier this season. But still, it's just not a good conference. And they need to do better. So yeah, that's why we're going to go with Virginia to keep things rolling for them. They're 6.5 point favorites. The other ranked team to talk about, Louisville hosting Cal. We got to go Louisville there. Some bad news as losing one of their running backs going into this game, Isaac Brown, which is a bit of a bummer because you want to have that duo there in the backfield going for the rest of the season, but we'll see how they recoup. Louisville's favored by 20.5 points. It has been rising since the beginning of the week from 20 points. I don't know if they cover. I think they win by like 17 over Cal. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be 20.5 points for sure. The final game, which should have been a high profile matchup, but has turned into a non-ranked affair between Florida State and Clemson. They're at the very bottom. Clemson somehow is favorites in this game by 2.5 points. Kind of don't understand that. They have been losing to everybody basically at home. And I think they're going to continue to lose at home, especially against Florida State, who is pretty decent. They got their first ACC win in quite a long time, like a very long time, last week against Wake Forest at home. Now again, Florida schools don't play really well outside of the state of Florida, but South Carolina is not that far away. So yeah, I think we have to go with Florida State, as we're going against the grain with this pick. And it is what it is if we get it wrong. But yeah, let's go Seminoles. We keep moving into the Big 12. Friday night game between Houston and UCF. When I was looking at the line for this, at least in my notes, I was like looking in the American, because in my head I still have these schools in the American, as there are now multiple seasons into the Big 12. Regardless, between the Cougars and the Golden Knights of Central Florida, I'm going to go Houston on the road against, again, Central Florida. I think they're just playing a little bit better. I know last week they lost to West Virginia, but here again, Central Florida kind of know each other pretty well. And Fritz would want to bounce back, even though they definitely are not in the conversation for a Big 12 title, but they definitely want to finish well. So yeah, let's go Houston, who are not favored again, but Central Florida only has a 1 point difference being set up for them. So yeah, it's basically a coin toss between the two. Next up is the biggest game of the weekend. BYU heads over to Lubbock, Texas. Number 7 versus number 9. We got Cougars. We got Red Raiders. Satake, McGuire. It's going to be a hell of a matchup. Again, there in Lubbock, Texas. Game day is going to be there. And for this one, yep, I flipped my pick, guys. Originally, I went BYU. I have now flipped it over to Texas Tech. I don't really like it that much. I think BYU has a lot of elements where they could expose the Red Raiders. They just have to be able to run the ball effectively. We'll talk about some injury news for BYU when we get into the news section. Texas Tech is favored by 10 points. It has been dropping since the beginning of the week at 10.5. And I think, yeah, they win by at least 2 possessions over the Cougs, hand BYU their first loss of the season. It'd be kind of a loss for the Big 12 if they don't finish the season with at least a undefeated team going into the playoff. I think if BYU can win out, it will benefit the conference a hell of a lot more because they will get that first round bye and kind of just want to have more perception of that, of having that bye. But I think, yeah, BYU slips here. They also tend to dig themselves into holes. And who's good at making those holes? Well, that Texas Tech defense, who has been scoring points, causing a lot of turnovers, setting up their offense with excellent field position. Baron Morton, who just came back last week against Kansas State. So this is another week back where he doesn't have to knock off Russ, which is pretty good as BYU comes to town. So unfortunately, we're not going Provo Cougs. We're going Red Raiders. Colorado. Well, they make a trip all the way to Morgantown, West Virginia to take on the Mountaineers. On Monday, we talked about some good news that Coach Prime is making the quarterback switch finally to Juju Lewis. Thought it was a big mistake to not already make the switch already. As it's kind of like that one that I'm like, why did Juju even go to Boulder in the first place? And then the other one was the Stanford coaching staff finally making the change to Elijah Brown. Just some bonehead decisions there, to be quite honest. I don't think it's going to be a bonehead decision, as we're going to go West Virginia, who's going to go up against a quarterback getting his first start. Last week, the defense had their way against Houston. I think it'll continue this week, as West Virginia fans will be up for it, especially beating a ranked team last week. So yeah, let's go Mountaineers there in Morgantown. They're favored by 6.5 points and has been rising since the beginning of the week at 6 points. Next up, we got Kansas taking a trip to Tucson, Arizona. And my boys over at DGen Takes are not going to like this pick, as they are Wildcat alums, as I don't think Arizona will be bearing down there in Tucson. I think Kansas starts their end of the season streak where they go on a run and tear up a bunch of teams that they run into, and I think Arizona ends up being one of those teams. On top of that, we're going against the grain with this pick. Arizona is favored by 4.5 points, so we're risking it with the biscuit to take the Jayhawks on the road there. So give me some Jalen Daniels in Kansas. The final game is Iowa State taking a trip down to Fort Worth, Texas to take on TCU. We're picking the Horned Frogs. Why? Well, Iowa State dealing with so many injuries. Also, when I tuned into yesterday's show for DGen Takes, I thought Noah, the money train choo choo, made a good point. If Iowa State didn't deal or have to deal with all these injuries that they have been dealt with or dealt, it's been a rough set of cards for the Cyclones. They could potentially be a top 15 team. But when you don't have guys in the secondary, even your kicker Conradi, who hits a pretty decent amount of field goals in terms of range. Then on top of that, there's some more bad news we'll talk about in the news section. There on defense, you're just going to have a bad time. And I think they're going to have a bad time against the Horned Frogs, who are favored by 7 points. It has been rising since the beginning of the week at 6.5. So yeah, let's go TCU there. So we are continuing to move through the conferences. Second to last one to talk about is the Big Ten. Starting with a Friday night game, Northwestern heads over to, I don't know, it's getting pretty cool down here in sunny Southern California, to be quite honest with you. And I'm in like the Inland Empire where it gets pretty hot. But there in LA, it should be starting to get a little chilly there at night, at least for California terms. Northwestern coming to town, pretty interesting matchup, as they've been all right. They haven't been too good, but definitely punching above their weight in certain matchups. They take on a freshly ranked USC team here at Air Sports Outpost, in at number 22 after that win last week against Nebraska on the road. So yeah, I think that's why we're going with USC. They've been pretty decently consistent. They are 14.5 point favorites. But boy, would I be laughing so hard if I see Northwestern beating the Trojans there in the Coliseum. But I think USC wins. I don't know about 14.5 points. That's a kind of an interesting line being set. We keep moving to one of the most disappointing matchups, at least looking at it from the preseason perspective, and that's Indiana making the trip to Happy Valley. In the preseason series of videos that we talked about, we mentioned this game and how interesting it would be. Now, Indiana has only beaten Penn State twice. One was, I think, in 2020 there in Bloomington, and the other one was, I think, back in the day in Bloomington. So if I'm not mistaken, Indiana has never beaten Penn State there in Happy Valley. I think I mistakenly said that they did to the run-up to us talking about this game. But yeah, that's pretty interesting to bring up. Also, Indiana is favored by 14.5 points. So I don't think there's ever been a situation or a game between the two where the margin has been favored by Indiana, and especially by that much. That's kind of a big line for the Hoosiers on the road. I'm going to pick Indiana, but I don't think they cover. I think Penn State actually puts up a fight. I've been seeing some interesting predicted scores. CFB Home, one of our homies over there on X with a massive following. They have Indiana winning by like 2 or 3. I think it's like 3 possessions. If Indiana wins by 3 possessions, I think they should be at least in the AP poll and college football rankings, the number 1 team in the country. We already have them there because, again, our rankings is kind of predicting the future. And what the future says is, the Hoosiers should be number 1. And that's why we're also picking them there to beat Penn State. Next up, we have Ohio State taking a trip to Lafayette, Indiana to take on Purdue. Or it might be West Lafayette. Regardless, they're going to beat the Boilermakers. This is one of the biggest margins of the week. 29-point favorites for the Buckeyes. It has been rising since the beginning of the week at 28.5. And yeah, they had their way against the Nittany Lions, especially there in the second half in the shoe. Here against Purdue, the Boilermakers have been hit with big injuries on defense, or not on defense, on offense. So yeah, I can't really find too many points that Purdue can actually score. So this should be a nice blowout, and Ohio State should cover that 29-point spread. Next up, we got Rutgers hosting Maryland. two teams that have been struggling as of late. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. We are going to go with the Scarlet Knights. They are not favored, but it's basically a coin toss. The Terps have a -1 line in favor of them. But yeah, I just don't think Maryland was really playing anything special in their beginning of the season schedule. And it's going to continue to be just bad. Just bad and disappointing. As I think Loxley, in at least a lot of people making lists for coaches in the hot seat, he might be gone for Maryland as a result, because there's been a decent amount of money being invested there. There's a book I just read this offseason that talked about Maryland quite a bit, talking about that money. But compared to like Big Ten programs that are more high profile, it's definitely not even close to those numbers. But for at least Maryland, it's a decent amount. And yeah, I think they fall to Rutgers. It's kind of just like must win for both teams. And I think Rutgers, who I've definitely saw a decent performance earlier this season at home against Iowa. Yeah, probably same case for them against Maryland, but they get the win. We keep moving to Oregon, heading over to Iowa City to take on the Hawkeyes. Probably, I don't know if it's the second biggest game of the week, because Texas A&M versus Missouri could make that case of being the second biggest game of the week. But it's one of the top three. Oregon, one loss. You know, this would definitely take them out of the picture of not only being, you know, outside of the Big Ten championship game to defend their title, but also there for the college football playoff, as they definitely would have to be one of the first four teams out or one of the first four teams in with a loss here against Iowa. Now the Ducks are favored by 6 points. It's going to be pretty interesting. Very physical matchup they will have against the Hawkeyes, whose defense has been pretty solid. I think that's why they have been winning games or being close as well. It was technically a one possession difference between Iowa and Indiana, but Indiana had that weird play at the end where they gave Iowa free safety, so it was like an extra 2 points that I think made it technically a one possession game. So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting for this matchup. I think Dante Moore and company have a little bit more going on for them, and why we're going to go with Oregon to beat Iowa on the road. Next up, we got Washington heading over to Madison to take on Wisconsin. It's an afternoon kickoff. And yeah, Badgers, they're so bad. And on top of that, I don't think they've won a Big Ten game whatsoever this season. I think they're going to continue to not win anything in the Big Ten. And yeah, Luke Fickell definitely is going to be gone by the end of the season for sure. I mean, he has to be. He has to be. For Washington, who are 11-point favorites in this game, they definitely have to continue to win, as at least in the AP, they are ranked for the first time this season. They beat Illinois. That's kind of like their best win. They had an okay fight against Ohio State, even though they lost that game at home. But other than that, they haven't really been having like a noticeable opponent where they beat. They lost to Michigan, which I guess gave Michigan their signature win of the season, but that's not too impressive. I think, yeah, Washington has a chance to maybe give Wisconsin their first Big Ten win of the season. But they still have to play Oregon at the end of the year. So it's like they definitely are not going to be in the picture whatsoever for a college football playoff opponent appearance. So I'm stumbling and bumbling through that one. But yeah, this is just them having to run the table to get some kind of good result. But But yeah, let's go Washington to beat Wisconsin. The final game should be one of the most entertaining ones, I think, this weekend, and that is Nebraska heading to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA. I wanted to take Nebraska, but without Dylan Raiola, what is that offense going to be? And they basically fell apart last week against USC, so when they play another LA school here on the road, I don't think it's going to go well. The Bruins are not favored by much. It's only 2.5 points for UCLA. So yeah, this should be a very nice back and forth contest. I think UCLA actually covers and wins by more than 2.5, but it should be a close game for the first 3 quarters. So yeah, let's go Bruins. The final game the final games to talk about in the SEC conference. We start with Georgia heading to Starkville to take on Mississippi State. Georgia are 9-point favorites. Has been rising since the beginning of the week at 7.5. The Bulldogs last week got their first conference win in I don't know how many days against Arkansas. They're on the road. Maybe should have got it the week before against Texas, but fell short in overtime. Here, it might be a close game. I think Georgia has not been crazy good, and I think it's just the landscape of college football at the moment to where they just don't have a stacked roster. And since they don't have a stacked roster, they're just going to have a lot of close score lines. Here, it should be like a close game where you'll see like, oh, Georgia is struggling. They're in Starkville in the beginning, but should have a couple big plays to where they pull away and beat Mississippi State, who have a backup quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, Blake Shapen. At least in the highlights for the game last week, I didn't see him in. So I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. But they still won with their backup, who I cannot remember his last name. But I think Georgia wins, and it'll set up a big Week 12 matchup against Texas next week in Athens. Next game to talk about includes an FCS program, and that's the Citadel heading over to Oxford, Mississippi to take on Ole Miss. This is the biggest line being set for the week. It makes a whole hell of a lot of sense because it's an FCS program going against an FBS program. 54.5 points. I repeat, 54.5 points for Ole Miss. And I think they could probably cover because their offense pretty good. You know, they scored a ton against Georgia. Obviously, they lost that game, though. They've been scoring a ton against a lot of good teams. Oklahoma, I think they put up like 36 or something like that. So, yeah, it makes a whole hell of a lot of sense of why they would be scoring a decent amount against the Citadel. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they cover that 54.5 point spread. Texas A&M is on the road. They're in Columbia, Missouri to take on the Tigers. Number 3 versus number 13 here at your Sports Outpost. Aggies, Tigers, Elko, Drinkwitz. It's going to be a hell of a good game. If Missouri somehow pulls it off, it'll be finally their first signature win of the season, to where it's like you can only look at like Kansas being like their big win of the season, which is not the greatest. But if we beat A&M, yeah, you definitely could be in some conversations there, especially to be one of those teams that don't play for the SEC title but could get into the playoff. And maybe this is the end of the road for the Aggies. It could be. But I'm still sticking with Texas A&M. I love Marcel Reed. I love the offensive line. For me, they're kind of like similar in terms of like roster builds with Indiana. You know, great quarterback that can sling it. Great offensive line that can make holes and offer a decent amount of protection in the passing game. Or in play action as well. And then a plethora of weapons either out wide. You know, Concepcion, Craver. Those are some just lethal wide receivers. Some running backs Even though I think one of them got injured, I'm just not remembering them off the top of my head, but at least they have two guys there in the backfield that can go. And then a pretty solid defense. And that's kind of all you really need to be competitive in general, and especially in the SEC. But Missouri, they do have some pass rushers there that should give Texas A&M some trouble. But I think, again, the Aggies win at the end of the day. But this one, it's going to be a nice contest. Probably one of the best games of the weekend. Next up, another one just like that Florida State Clemson one in the ACC. We have LSU versus Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, what a disappointment LSU has been, but nothing new. We were not surprised by this. Brian Kelly especially being fired. Joe Sloan being fired. They got to be able to run the ball. If they cannot run the ball, no. You're not going to win games. You're not going to be competitive, and expect whatever kind of roster you build should be only winning like 7 to 8 games at most in the SEC. And again, like Georgia, these programs can't stockpile guys on their depth chart, and that's kind of why we have been seeing LSU not themselves. And they should be themselves this upcoming weekend and probably get blown out by Alabama, and I'm not going to be surprised. Now, this is going to be the first game for LSU without Brian Kelly because they just had a bye. But also Alabama had a nice bye, so they are well prepared to take on the Bayou Bengals. The last time LSU won, though, in Tuscaloosa has been a minute. I think it's been since Joe Burrow and Coach O were there on the LSU sideline. And I don't think it happens this upcoming weekend. But it could be the same case like earlier this season when Alabama played Florida State, where they underestimated their opponents. But I think Alabama wins it. So yeah, let's go Crimson Tide as our 10-point favorites. I think I might have skipped over a game. Auburn versus Vanderbilt. Let's talk about that. Vandy is who we're going to be picking. They're 6.5-point favorites. 7 to begin the weekend, so it's been dropping. Pretty interesting. Auburn this past week got rid of Hugh Freeze. I think maybe you should have fired him after this weekend, because you're going to go up against a very good Vandy school. And I think it's also the first weekend where we see Auburn's defense give up more than 24 points, which is nuts. Auburn's defense is so good that they have not given up more than 24 points. That's how much the offense hasn't been offering. And if they would have gotten that side right, Auburn would have been a legit team this season, but they haven't been scoring enough. We saw them only score 3 points against Kentucky last week at home, and we should expect them not to score much against the Commodores, who have still an outside chance if they win the rest of their games. This is a must-win for Vanderbilt. So yeah, that's why we're going to take Clark Lee and his squad there in Nashville. The final game. Got some bottom feeders here in the Southeastern Conference. Florida versus Kentucky. One program has gotten rid of their head coach already this season. I'm expecting Kentucky to do the same when it all wraps up here for their 2025 schedule. I think Stoops basically, I don't know who they can hire after that, but you're not going to do any better with him as your head coach. But they do welcome the Gators to town there in Lexington. This is one of the closest margins being set up between any of the SEC games. Jeez, it's getting a little crazy here with this stream. For Florida, yeah, they should have like a nice first win since Napier has been gone. Who they play? I can't remember who they played last week and lost. Yeah, I cannot remember off the top of my head. Regardless, I don't think they win here. Oh, actually, I do think they win here. As like I was trying to get back to the point of their first win since Napier's been gone. Kentucky, though, they play decent defense, but it is, you know, Florida. They have a hell of a lot more talent than the Wildcats, but they could definitely put up a fight. Florida's only favored by 3 points. I think it'll probably be a 3-point difference. Probably a field goal is what it's going to be for the Gators to win this there in Lexington. So yeah, let's go Florida. And yep, that has been it. We have picked all 52 games as they are, again,